My brother stood at his wedding reception, raising a champagne glass in my direction. "To my sister Emma," he said. "She works in food service. It's honest, humble work. Not everyone can be a CEO or a surgeon." The room clapped politely, their eyes full of pity. What they didn't know was that in less than 5 minutes, their entire perception of me and their own smug self-satisfaction was about to implode. Because I wasn't just some grocery clerk. I was the CEO of a $4.2 billion company. And that night, they were about to find out. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or looked down on, this story will feel like sweet, poetic justice. Hit subscribe, give this video a like, and drop a comment with the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen. Now, let's dive into how one wedding went from humiliation to revelation. The morning of my brother Marcus's wedding began the same way every family event had for the last 5 years, with a phone call from my mother. Her voice dripped with that perfect cocktail of sympathy and condescension she'd mastered. "Emma, sweetheart, I know this is hard for you. Being around Marcus's successful friends, Patricia's family, with all their achievements. Just try not to embarrass the family today." I stared at the mustard-yellow bridesmaid dress hanging in front of me. Patricia, my soon-to-be sister-in-law, had chosen it specifically for me. On my body, it looked like a diseased banana. But that wasn't the real sting. No. The real sting was when my mom gently reminded me not to bring up my job situation. Not my career. Not my company. My situation. Like I was dealing with a medical condition instead of running a global enterprise. Because in my family's eyes, I worked at a grocery store. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask, was that I had built Anderson Global Logistics into a supply chain empire valued at over $4 billion. We employed 85,000 people across 47 countries, revolutionized cold chain pharmaceutical distribution, and handled logistics for 30% of the Fortune 500. But to my family, I was still the girl scanning barcodes and stocking shelves at Safeway. And honestly, it started out true. Back when I was first building my business, I took night shifts at a Safeway to learn retail logistics from the ground up. Where most executives studied spreadsheets, I wanted to live it, understand it, feel it. When my relatives asked what I did, I'd vaguely say food retail or supply chain. They translated that into "Emma works at a grocery store." And once that narrative stuck, no amount of clarification could pry it loose. The first time I tried to explain, Uncle Richard literally patted my shoulder and said, "That's great, honey. Good to be ambitious about your grocery store job." After that, I gave up. Let them believe what they wanted. But by the time Marcus's wedding rolled around, their version of my life had become insulting. At the rehearsal dinner, Patricia's brother Jason asked if I planned to open my own restaurant. Before I could answer, Marcus jumped in with a laugh. "Oh no. Emma's not the entrepreneurial type. She just works at a grocery store. It's honest work, though." Jason's face froze for half a second, too polite to show his surprise. But Patricia's parents exchanged a look. That look of awe, so she's the family underachiever. Later that night, I overheard Patricia's mother telling my own mother, "Emma would love being godmother to their children. Of course, she's not in a position to be much of a financial influence." Financial influence? I was about to close a $1.8 billion merger in Singapore. But the real humiliation came on the wedding day itself. During hair and makeup, the other bridesmaids introduced themselves. One was a pediatric surgeon. One was launching her second startup. One was a partner at a consulting firm. When they asked about me, Patricia smiled sweetly. "Oh, Emma works in grocery. She's been doing it for years now." The surgeon gave me the kind of polite smile you give a child showing off finger paintings. "That must be stable work." "Very stable," I said with a straight face. I didn't mention that stable came from controlling food distribution for Walmart, Target, and Amazon. At the ceremony, Aunt Susan whispered, "Poor Emma. That color is so unflattering on her." Another relative replied, "It's the stress. Financial pressure ages you." By the time the reception began, I was numb. I'd endured toast after toast celebrating everyone else's accomplishments. When Marcus finally toasted me, It was the cherry on top. He looked at me with faux warmth. To my sister Emma, who works in food service. It's honest, necessary work, and we love her for her dedication to simpler values. The applause that followed was pitying. Like, I just announced I was going into rehab. And that's when things took a sharp turn. I stepped outside to breathe and overheard Patricia's mother grilling Marcus. Is Emma financially stable? I'm worried about her being a role model for your children. Marcus laughed. She can barely take care of herself. Been working the same grocery job for 7 years. Mom even sends her money for rent sometimes. We all chip in for her car payments. I froze. That was a complete lie. I had never taken a dime from my family. A few minutes later, I overheard my cousin Derek telling Patricia's relatives, "My mom thinks Emma might have a learning disability. How else do you explain someone stuck in an entry-level job that long?" "Ignorance is bliss," he said. Something in me snapped. I texted David, my head of security. 10 minutes later, he confirmed the helicopter was fueled and waiting on the roof. I was ready to leave quietly. But Marcus, oh Marcus, decided to humiliate me one last time. He tapped his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, our families represent the best of what ambition can achieve. But not everyone needs to be a CEO or surgeon. My sister Emma reminds us there's dignity in simple work." And then Patricia's father raised his glass. "To Emma, for showing us happiness doesn't require success." The room turned to me, eyes filled with pity. And that's when David appeared at my side in his black suit. "Miss Anderson," he said clearly, his voice carrying across the room, "your helicopter is waiting. The Singapore board is on the line about the $1.8 billion Chin Industries merger. They can't proceed without your approval." The champagne glass slipped from Marcus's hand, shattering on the floor. I stood, smoothing my terrible mustard yellow dress. I tried to keep business separate from family, but international markets don't care about wedding schedules. The room went silent. Marcus sputtered, "Emma, what the hell is going on?" So, I told them. "My name is Emma Anderson. I'm the founder and CEO of Anderson Global Logistics. We employ 85,000 people worldwide. Handle distribution for 30% of the Fortune 500. Revenue, $4.2 billion annually." The silence was electric. Jaws literally dropped. I kept going. The grocery store job? That was research. I built my first distribution center while working nights at Safeway. Most execs learn from consultants. I learned by stocking shelves. A cousin in the back whispered, "Oh my God, she's on Forbes." Her phone glowed with my profile. Patricia's face drained of color. "You said she worked at a grocery store," she hissed at Marcus. I thought she did." Marcus stammered. "No," I said evenly. "You assumed. You all did. You decided that because I wasn't flaunting my success, I must not have any. You created a story about me being broke, needing help, even having disabilities. None of it was true. You never asked." I paused, letting it sink in. "Last Christmas, you thought I skipped because I couldn't afford the ticket. I was in Tokyo negotiating a deal that brought 2,000 jobs back to the US. When I missed Derek's wedding, you assumed I was working extra shifts. Actually, I was opening a facility in Germany." Faces turned pale. Derek looked like he might vomit. I finally smiled. "For what it's worth, Marcus, I hope you and Patricia are happy. Just remember, marriage should be about loving someone as they are, not who you assume them to be." David glanced at his watch. "Ms. Anderson, Singapore is waiting." As I walked out, the entire ballroom parted for me like I was royalty. Minutes later, I was in a helicopter above the glittering Seattle skyline, my phone buzzing with desperate calls and texts from relatives. I shut it off. For once, I wasn't invisible. And maybe it was time the world saw exactly who I was. That night, my family's smug narrative crumbled in front of 200 wedding guests. The family charity case turned out to be the most successful person in the room. For years, they had underestimated me, patronized me, rewritten my life into a tragedy. But in one unforgettable moment, the truth exploded out, and their pity turned into stunned silence. Humility is a virtue, but invisibility? That's a prison. I'd spent years downplaying my success, thinking it kept the peace. But the truth is, sometimes, letting people see who you really are is the sweetest revenge of all. If you've ever been underestimated, you know how satisfying it feels when the truth finally comes out. Hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves a good revenge twist. And tell me in the comments, what's the most jaw-dropping moment of vindication you've ever witnessed? Because as this story proves, sometimes the best revenge is just being unapologetically yourself.